So this episode we've recorded with Mark is it's gold. And you may want to pause this episode and listen to it with your partner because we're going to talk about relationship dynamics and supporting one another, not just in the context of sex, other areas of intimacy, and navigating different challenges, especially in a couple that is struggling with infertility and trying to conceive.
Before we jump into this episode, I want to remind you that while Caitlin and Sophia are dietitians, we're not your dietitians. This means the information shared in the Food Freedom Fertility podcast is intended to entertain, educate, and inform. It is not a substitute for medical care. This information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor before making any changes.
Welcome to another episode of Food, Freedom, and Fertility. We are so excited to have a male in the house today, and we're going to get to that in just a second. But I want to give Sophia the mic for a minute to tell us what the last hour of her life has done so that if she comes into this episode silly or wild, you know why.
Okay. So just now, I went this morning to like a military wife event, and it was a kayak tour, and it was wonderful and fun. But one of the gals who happens to be my neighbor is, I hope she's listening to this. I'm gonna kind of throw you under the bus. I won't use your name. But she's a little bit of a spaz, and she was having some problems. So I opted to like help her bring her kayak in. And all she needed to do was just sit there. And that couldn't happen for her. And so she's like freaking out as we're like coming in the surf, and she like puts her paddle down, and so we like high side against a wave, and so the whole kayak like falls onto me. I'm in the front, so her legs are like over my head. I'm underneath the kayak in the water. Of course, we're in like 18 inches of water when this happens. It's like not anyway. So it was like right at the very end. I should have just left and come back to do this podcast recording. But instead, I end up tangled in this woman's legs underwater. And I was like fully clothed. And so now I'm shivering here a little bit, but it's sort of like a cold plunge, right?
Yeah.
So
you're activating that nervous system in
one
way or another.
So it was funny, and it was just ridiculous. And this lady, she's got 4 sons, and she is a very sweethearted woman, but I guess is like just a total spaz in any kind of situation like this. It's just pretty funny because all these gals are married to like the most
War
amphibious
hero.
men,
Yeah.
the most amphibious war heroes. And some of them, like one girl, I was shocked she was there because her whole thing, like I've been to a bunch of different stuff with her. Whenever we play like 2 truths and a lie or like whatever, she's like, I hate the ocean. I've only been in it once. I'm never getting in it again. And yet she came to this thing, and I was like, oh my gosh. And her partner did the same kind of thing. We're like freaked out and almost capsized the whole thing. And it was this like very gentle, like a grandma could have done this. It was not anything intense. And these girls like blah, fall into the water.
Sophia.
Oh my gosh.
So funny. We should do something like that. We should
see you and I in a kayak. Oh God, Caitlin.
Yeah, we should do it. Okay, I'm going to introduce Mark here. Mark is a men's coach with 14 years of experience as a licensed professional counselor and a decade of running a successful private practice. I'm going to skip a little bit because this is where you guys are going to get interested. Mark found himself feeling a little checked out and burnout, and the birth of his first child brought additional challenges, straining the intimacy in his marriage. Mark and his wife soon realized they needed to evolve their relationship, moving from being disconnected roommates to becoming deeply connected partners. And isn't that what we are all after? The transformative journey led to a creation of Intimacy Evolution, a program born out of their commitment to growth. Mark specifically, driven by the realization that other couples need to evolve too, made the bold decision to step away from his private practice in psychotherapy to pursue his true passion, helping a greater number of men and couples achieve deep connection and fulfillment. Mark's an expert in guiding men to embrace their full emotional expression and desires, heal past wounds, and connect more authentically with themselves and those around them. So, Mark, welcome. We're so happy to have you. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us.
Yes, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Joining the small ranks of men who've been on the Food Freedom Fertility podcast, the few, the proud.
Yeah, I feel very honored. Yeah,
Mark and
wonderful.
I, usually Sophia's like, oh, I'm just down the road from you because everybody cool lives in California or something. Mark lives like 3 hours away from me in actually a pretty cool spot in Arkansas, which I've driven through a handful of times to go see my sister at the Little Rock Air Force Base. So super fun to know I can just drive down the road and go to a couples retreat someday. And that's pretty fun.
That's
I'm
right. You
so
sure
pumped to
can.
hear what you're doing, Mark, and what you're bringing to the table. I just want you to let it rip. Tell us everything.
Let
Yeah.
it rip.
Give us,
Okay.
so I gave the like professional bio summary. Give us
hmm
the like, and I'm a real person. And how did I end up here? Story.
Yeah, let's go that story. So, like the bio said, it was really my wife and I had this wonderful relationship. We had it for many, many years. Then we had our first child, and it got hard. It got really hard. It felt like the hardest part in our relationship was immediately that year to 2 years after having our first child. And we had little support. We kind of felt blindsided. Like everybody's talking about how the baby's going to develop and everything else, but no one's like, hey, this is how your relationship's going to develop. Here's what's coming next. It's like, no, no, figure it out. And so we scuffled for quite a while there, and randomly my wife's like, hey, let's go to this couples retreat. I'm like, okay. And so from there it was just um continuing. We had a therapist, we did couples therapy, we did all this stuff, and it was just about reconnecting. And our business intimacy evolution came from the fact that we have to evolve our relationship over and over throughout the rest of our life. Every time we have a child, anytime you bring somebody new into a group, the whole dynamics have
Ecosystem.
to shape. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they all have to change. And so every time we have a child, we have to evolve our relationship. When kids get older and they're teenagers, well, now we have a different dynamic as well. And we work with couples after children leave the nest, and then it changes again. So there's all these significant changing points. And I feel a lot more prepared now than when we had our first child, and I was just working all the time, checked out, you know, the death scroll on the phone, the uh, watching TV, and just not actually connecting
And isn't
deeply.
isn't that like where the generations are going, period? Like I just feel like
Mm.
technology, I don't want to assume I know how old you are, Mark, but like when we were all on the couch and saw our parents' relationships, they had different pulls for their attention that were not as strong or as fast or as immediate as what the technology can do in our current time with having children.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
I mean, it's awesome. In one way, we're having this podcast. This couldn't have happened in our parents' generation with three people in three different states coming together in real time. But it's, there's significant drawbacks to your relationships.
yeah. I mean, it's a great electronics are a great way to connect people. It's just at what cost? We got to look at the depth of connection.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just because I can call a friend that's states away, I have to take the initiative and do that and share and express and ask questions that are related to depth and emotional connection.
Can I
So,
ask,
Hmm.
how many children you guys have and kind of like what the age ranges are?
Yeah. So we have a son that his birthday was this week, so he turned 9,
Oh,
and then a 5-year-old, and so she is in kindergarten, and so this is the first time in our life where we don't have a child at home all the time,
uh-huh.
and so
Interesting.
that's been a transition.
Hey, Food Freedom and Fertility family. It's Sophia introducing Fertility Cloud. High treatment costs can be daunting, but here's some good news. 80% of Fertility Cloud patients have gotten pregnant for under $2,000 after just 5 months of treatment. Starting your family doesn't need to come with a huge price tag. Fertility Cloud virtual consultations mean you can talk to them from the comfort of your couch. They create personalized plans for men and women, whether it's ovarian stimulation with Clomid or Letrozole, Ovidrel trigger shots, guidance on male fertility, or even weight management support with medication. As a special for Food Freedom and Fertility listeners, get $50 off your initial medical doctor consultation. With meds delivered in just a day or two, unlimited support for your questions, and free follow ups when needed, they're here to make your path to parenthood smoother and more affordable. Ready to start? Visit myfertilitycloud.com and enter Food Freedom, one word, at checkout.
Yeah.
So,
What challenges is your wife Brianna? Brianna?
yep, Brianna.
Brianna. What were some of the bigger challenges that made you guys finally say like we got to go to therapy? Like as a psychologist, you're like
Yeah,
we need a professional that's not me to come to this conversation and help us.
that's a great question. I don't know that I've ever reflected on like how I knew. It was just a feeling, right? I can't really pinpoint it. It was just we were doing everyday life, and we were at like each other's, the conflict level was very high and the connection was very low, and it was like, okay, I'm not willing to do this the rest of our life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want to be with you, I love you, and something has to change.
Mm-hmm. Did she feel that way too?
Yeah. She like, so people are different. I'm the type that uh I'm pretty like, no matter what happens, I'm really committed in making things work. And she's a little less so. She's like, well, if this doesn't work, I guess it doesn't work, and I'll move on my way. And so we
Mm-hmm.
have just like natural differences there.
Is she more of like an avoider? Like when things are tough, she's more like try to stay out of the way and not like bring it to a head. And you're more of like a let's bring this up and fix it.
I would say it's probably the opposite.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, and we could talk whole family dynamics. My mom was emotionally numb, checked out, that type of thing. And so, my parents avoided a lot of conflict. And so I tend to be the let's fix it. And this is not a positive sometimes. I tend to be a peacekeeper in trying
Yeah.
to appease everyone, which is something I've really had to work hard on because I get left out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody
Don't bring up
else,
the hard thing. It's going to make this moment hard.
yeah,
Let's just keep going and put the hard thing over there and try not to step on it.
yeah. So I tend to be a little bit more of that, and she is the one that, how do I say this? She runs straight at it, and she comes from like a family of yellers,
Mm-hmm.
so the
Old
loudness and
Yellers. Mm-hmm.
yeah, the
I'm familiar.
intensity is up and high.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's definitely a dynamic between her and I that we've had to work on.
Mm-hmm.
And these two trigger points, trauma points, will they'll always be there
Mm-hmm.
for our whole lives, our whole relationship. They will be there. It's how do we notice them, how do we work with them, and kind of work around those two things. So I mean, a month doesn't go by, a week doesn't go by where these come up just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean, the relational dynamics is a huge part of everything, and knowing yourself and your relationship is the first step of most things when it comes to how can we connect better, how can we love more, how can we, you know, be more devoted to each other, all those things.
I love those words, like devoted. That's really what marriage should feel like, is like a deep devotion to the other person. And it's easy to, in the moment, be like, I'm right and you're wrong. But like, that's not the game we're playing. The game we're playing is we're devoted, and we leave this, like, we need to leave each other better. We need to fight for this and be devoted to this, whether we're trudging through hard, mucky water or not.
Just now in this kayak thing I did, they okay.
I knew you were going to go there. As soon as I said water, I was like, fuck, I should reel that word back.
No, it's truly like the like guides are trying to keep it like lighthearted and everything, and they're like, okay, you're gonna get in a kayak with somebody, like what's the most important thing in any relationship? And he wanted everybody to say
Trust.
Communication.
Oh,
he wanted everybody to say communication, right? Because like the person in the back is steering, the person in the front is like the motor. And I yelled commitment. And everybody else was like communication. And I was like, oh. But I really think, you can get somebody who's a great communicator who's not committed. And what is that going to serve? I think.
Interesting, as a best friend over here, when I think of all the conversations you and I have about how we want to show up in our marriage, Sophia, I would say you and your husband are two of the most committed individuals I've ever known. But maybe there are some communication.
Oh, for sure.
So it's funny that that's the first word that came
the communication
out of your mouth.
is horrible.
Yeah.
First of all, he's deaf as doo-doo. That's step one. That's the problem. Communication.
If you can't actually hear, it's really hard.
He can't actually hear me.
Yes.
You have talked about how couples might come into things with different trauma, background, history of relationships that were displayed to them, maybe with some positives, maybe with some negatives. Talk to me about the difference between men and women in intimacy and like power dynamics. I know you have a lot to say on this. So
yeah. Okay, so let's start with the definition of dynamics, and that is how two pieces impact one another. And so we bring what we bring into our relationship from our history, our beliefs, everything else. Our partner brings in what they believe, and then we mix together. And sometimes we mix certain pieces really well, and then other times there's certain pieces that don't mix so well. And so when it comes to like the dynamics and the power between the couple, is we can't both maintain the same pull. And so if I'm leading something and my partner's following, it works really well. And if my partner's leading something and I'm following, great. But when we're both trying to lead or we're both trying to follow, if we're both following, then nothing's going to happen. If we're both leading, most likely conflict's going to happen. And so it's, from my point of view, it's okay, where do we do this really well? And where do we struggle to do this? If we were both avoiders of conflict, the research actually says that works. Those couples are pretty happy. It's when we have like my relationship, which is more common, is you have maybe a one avoider and one that's not so much. And then how do we work with that conflict? And so let's talk about kids and pregnancy and that type of thing. Oftentimes, intimacy, statistically speaking, not always the case, but society says men are the leaders when it comes to sex.
Like initiating it,
wanting it more, pursuing it in the relationship, trying to set things up to where that's what's going to happen.
Yes. And then when we go to trying to conceive a child, oftentimes it switches, because now the woman's going, hey, here's my ovulation cycle or whatever it might be. And now they're leading that whole dynamic. And so if it worked really well before when the man was leading and now we've just switched it, is how's it working? And so sometimes this is where um, polarity gets off and we have performance issues. We have, we're outside of our comfort zone. What's this look like? How are we going to do this? When, where, all that type of stuff starts to shift. And so I see that a lot with the clients I work with is when we start talking about having children, um, I get these like just dumbfounded look from these men of like, what's my role here? And so I talk to people all the time like, hey, let's have conversations about what your actual role is in our relationship in different parts. If it's in the home, we talk about what our role is. If it's financially, what are our roles? Well, when it comes to having children, what are your roles? How are we going to work this? Let's be intentional and plan out and see what we can do to keep both parties feeling like they're part of this and moving the dynamic in a positive way. So that's one big piece I see is how that can shift and how it can be kind of turned on its head when it comes to, you know, planning to conceive and you know, almost, if you will, mandatory sex
Mm-hmm.
versus
Compulsory versus spontaneous.
yeah. And so I really believe, and we do it in our relationship, we both have scheduled and spontaneous sex. Because that's what seems to work really well for us and a lot of clients. So we have a calendar, we have something on there, but we also have, the spontaneous sex as well. And so uh, that allows for us to play with those dynamics and whatnot. And if you're coming from a relationship where it was only spontaneous, now we're shifting to everything being scheduled. Well, there's a lot changing there.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot to get used to or navigate.
I think
uh,
that's true whether you're talking about sex or anything. Like
yep.
I used to live in California and I could hike every day I wanted. And now I live in flat as a pancake, Kansas, and I have to make intention and choose places I can go if I want that type of a workout. When we work with clients who kind of flew by the seat of their pants when it was like dinner time, what are you going to eat? And now we're saying, have a plan, have certain foods in the house, think about your actual skill set and what you might have the energy at the end of the day to make.
Mm-hmm.
We need to plan and prepare. That gives mealtime a completely different feel. Oftentimes, once you kind of get over the hump of it being different, it's freeing and better because you have a plan, you're eating the food that you have, you're not wasting money, but like that looks very different to a couple that has eaten out 3 nights a week and what do you want to have for dinner at 5:30? Like that feels different. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
some good, maybe some bad. Maybe you're like, it's Friday and all we have left is the stuff for quesadillas and I didn't want quesadillas tonight. But at least you have the stuff. Same thing I would think with intimacy, where it's like if you're used to it only being spontaneous or looking a certain way, and now all of a sudden we're working on your fertile window, that feels a lot different. And one thing that I've done with a lot of couples that have done a good job at realizing when a fertile window is and knowing that they have to optimize sex within that period of time is taking some of the ownership of that out of only the woman's hands. Like if you're charting your cycle on an app, choose an app that syncs with the cloud and get your husband on the same app and logged in. So every morning he can pull up the app himself and see, okay, based on what we're seeing, you just ovulated. So now we don't need to push so hard on sex. Or based on what we're seeing, I know you finished menstruating. I don't see that you've charted any cervical mucus, but I'm preparing in my mind. I'm looking for the week forward to know it's going to happen sometime maybe in this window, and taking some of that ownership back in a man's hands and like knowing and looking forward versus being like instructed, it's time to have sex now, has been a really powerful shift for a lot of couples that I've worked with.
Yeah, I'd like to hear, Mark, what else, like, so people are they're going from spontaneous sex to now scheduling sex. Like from the man's perspective, maybe a man that like has performance anxiety issues or is starting to see those for the very first time in his life and is like, this is extremely emasculating. I've been told by society that I should be like trying to get my Peter wet at all times. And now it's like flying at me and I can't even want it. Like, what do you recommend for these kinds of things? Like, what are your tips and tricks to making scheduled sex happen and good
Yes.
and something the man wants?
I love that question. And we also see this after vasectomies and other particular points. Um, and there's a lot of psychology behind it. But to answer the question directly, it is, I like to schedule experiences around the sex. So if we schedule something, I also want to keep it exciting. And so I want a whole experience. And really when it comes to majority of performance issues, it's we're too much in our head and not enough in our body
Yeah, I relate to
as
that
men.
deeply.
Yeah, and a lot of women do, because it's one of the things that makes foreplay so important for women is pulling them out of the head and into the body. And same with men when they're, you know, when they're looking at to perform, um, it's really getting them in the body. And it might be some of the same techniques that we use that we talk about with women. It's like, hey, more foreplay. Hey, can we use sensories? You know, can we use our senses to get in our body? Can we use, you know, touch and smells and other things that put us in that place? Can we create experiences? Like I said, you know, we have a plan, we have a fantasy, we have something that we're looking forward to. If we really like this thing, I mean, we can conceive in all positions, right? And so we still want
Well,
to.
almost. There are multiple holes you could choose to use.
Well, that's
Caitlin,
I'm talking
just taking a mouthful of water. People
penis,
get
vagina.
confused.
I
I had
I
someone
know.
ask me if she could be pregnant because her like date, she called him her date, first of all, had ejaculated across her legs and butt. And I was like, what? First of all, how does this fall to me to answer this question?
Where was your mom?
Secondly, because I'm here for people that are trying to conceive.
Yeah.
So if you're putting it on legs and butt, you're not
Sophia,
getting it where it
remember
needs
when
to
we were
get.
in New Orleans and I got in like 6 hours ahead of you? I went for a walk and there's the
Yeah.
guys that are like standing outside, like, here's a soap sample. And then as soon
Yeah,
as you
the soap
stop and
sample guy. Mhm.
take it, he's like, and let me show you this cream that will take away your wrinkles. And then he's like, who are you and what do you do? And I'm like, I help people get pregnant. I'm a dietitian. And he looks at me and he goes, hypothetically, if somebody were to have sex with their girlfriend and she had a tampon in during her menstrual cycle, could she get pregnant?
So the penis and the tampon were in at the same time?
And the menstrual cycle.
Oh,
I was
no.
like, I'm sitting there as he's offending me, telling me how wrinkly I am.
Dude, that girl had to be like high off her ass or just like drunk as hell. In order,
Talk about dryness and uncomfortability. Oh my goodness.
I'm just saying, you know, there are
you're
questions
like,
that
hypothetically, go to the doctor. Something's wrong.
so I was like, well, since you asked, let's talk about the science. Hypothetically, it would take a very short menstrual cycle for somebody to be bleeding and ovulating and have a fertile window that's overlapping, but it could happen. And if you ejaculated and some of the sperm got past the tampon, there is like probably a 0.001% chance she could get pregnant. What'd you tell the person with a ejaculate on her butt and her legs? Did you tell her?
I did. I was like, I
Probably
think I was
not.
very diplomatic, and I was like semen on your skin can't make you pregnant. And she was like, well, I know that. And I was like, well, then what the hell are we talking about here? What? No, but there really are people that like will ask, can I get pregnant from oral? Like, like, what if it gets in my belly button? There are people out there that think it needs to go in your belly button.
How did we
But
get
this,
here?
I don't
I
know,
don't know
Mark.
how
We
we
don't,
got
this
here.
isn't
Take us,
usually like,
reel us
this is,
back.
I'm sorry. We don't usually get this like kind of weird.
I know,
mean,
but you know
I don't
what? Sophia's wet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sophia's been wet
I'm
this whole
soaked
time.
over here. Disgusting.
This is why our very Christian
Not
audience
how I
loves
want
us.
people thinking about me, okay? I'm a professional. I was helping someone, which was how I fell in the sea.
As her legs were around your neck.
God, what the hell?
You totally
Some
teed
people
it
are
all
just
up. You teed
so
it all up.
floppy in athletic situations, or just like any sort of, oh my gosh.
Okay.
They just freak out and spaz over. I don't
We had
know.
to-
It's like
we
some
had to
people's
really
survival
show-
instincts are just really not.
Our maturity level. Like, we couldn't
Okay.
really have a dude on the podcast and talk about sex for that long and not laugh.
I know. It's true.
I mean, there's so many questions, Sophia. I mean, is that the first time you've had women's legs around you? I mean, I don't know.
Definitely not. It's happened. Usually accidentally in this way. You know, it's not something I'm seeking. You know, it's not something I'm trying to make happen. You know, sometimes it just happens like it
All
did
right.
right now.
Okay.
Oh
So
my
if
gosh.
if P and the V is happening,
Yep.
to reel us back in,
Yeah. If
italic.
ejaculation is happening within your vagina, okay? So it doesn't
Yes.
matter if you're on the top or the bottom or the side or behind or in front or whatever. It really does not matter. And it's also, I'm just going to put this out there also because people always ask this, it's not going to sway the gender of the baby, okay?
No.
So whether you're on top, underneath, sideways, inside out, I don't know. It's not going to sway the gender of your baby. I know people all the time that are like, you get a girl if it's missionary and a boy if it's doggy style. And I'm like, what? This is just poppycock. There's no logic behind those statements.
No, that's just what Grandma said. So
that's just people that, you know, it's like the old wives' tale. It's like people who named the constellations. Oh, well, that looks like a wolf. Like, no, it doesn't, Grandma. That looks like a bunch of dots. But that's just the way people make sense of things they don't understand, is they come up with these sort of weird tales.
Definitely. And there is some psychology of like, we're always trying to put things together to know, because as humans, we want to know things. And so we can make up stories. I joke with people I work with a lot that we're really good liars to ourselves.
Yeah, no one listens to you like you do.
Yeah. And so, yeah. Anywho.
Okay,
yeah,
so
I mean,
back to snap back to reality. Oops, it goes gravity. Okay, so coming back to,
I prefer Skittles myself.
What to do in these situations where we're seeing erectile dysfunction, performance anxiety, like maybe he's able to maintain or achieve and maintain an erection, but is really struggling to consistently have an orgasm. What do you recommend for people that are suddenly facing this for the first time? Or maybe it's been an issue all along, but it's really worsening now that they're trying to conceive.
Yeah. So the first thing is always talk about it. Have an open conversation with your partner. The more we hide behind it, the more we don't talk as a couple, the more it persists. So whenever we start talking about how we feel, if we have any shame, guilt, anything behind that, it starts to lose its power. And so if we're saying, hey, I'm feeling anxious, or I don't know why this is happening, but it is, and we have a conversation, we can make a plan to what to do about it next time. And we can also, it often loses a lot of that
Power early.
that power. Yeah. Because it starts to build. And the more we think about it and the more we worry about it, the less likely it is that we're going to ejaculate or have an erection or maintain an erection. So conversations.
So when you say conversations, some of these conversations are very hard to have. Like
Yes.
maybe there's sexual trauma in one or both of the partners' background. Maybe there is, who knows, all the layers of things. Maybe there's actually a physiological thing on top of the emotional thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think too, another thing is just like the snowball effect of having sex and not being able to sustain an erection or have an ejaculation. Like, even if the next time they probably could have, that emotional trauma of it not working last time has now layered upon it. And it's like this
I
bigger
see that so much. And
issue.
I think the ladies, we deal with that so much, right? If you've ever had like endometriosis lady here, if you've ever been doing something in the bedroom and suddenly there's a jolt of pain, you find yourself anticipating and guarding from that pain, and it becomes very difficult to enjoy yourself. It's like your body remembers what's going on, and it's like the
Mm-hmm.
more you're worried it's going to happen, the more it's going to happen, and the more pressure you feel. And this is a lot of what we're going to talk about with Hannah, the libido fairy, in an upcoming episode, is like the more pressure you feel to perform sexually, the less libido you have. And I this is part of why I want to bring up the whole like scheduling sex, because I think that even in doing that, there's there can be an anticipation of pleasure and joy and intimacy, but there can be an anticipation of performance. And so like, how do we remedy this mindset of performing sexually?
Well, that's a great one. It kind of depends on the couple. What is the things that have worked for them, right? Let's go back to the beginning. What worked really well for us? Because there's a blueprint out there. You know, there's a blueprint of like, at some point we were um, in that
Yeah, at some point you were
first
really into each
stage.
other and you couldn't
Yeah,
wait to hit the sheets together.
exactly. And so finding common threads there, finding what that looked like, what the points of like, hey, this was really exciting for me, this is what I really liked, and are we willing to revisit that? And sometimes the answer is no. um but oftentimes like we can figure out what that is and kind of move with that. So um if that is, you know going out on a more performative date, or if it's spending more time together, or even time away from each other, has
Mm.
done wonders for my relationship. So, um, going to retreats, or my wife going, recently, she went to Costa Rica and to a women's retreat. And you know what? I missed her.
Hmm.
I couldn't wait to see her. And so, you can imagine what that reconnection looked like. And so,
Yeah, that's why I have my second kid. My husband was out on a training op, and it he got home, and she's the fruit of our passions,
there
which
you
is
go.
shocking because we'd had such a journey to get pregnant the first time.
Mm,
So
sounds so beautiful.
you've brought up like a handful of times communication. Let's revisit what worked for
Yeah.
us. What if these conversations are something you are so scared to have? Like
Yeah.
what logistical, like very real life
Hmm.
applicable advice somebody can take away from this episode and be like, okay, I feel more comfortable approaching my husband or approaching my wife and saying like, we got to work through this, we got to talk about it. How can we like poke that bubble that's feeling so big and full and anxious and help it feel easier to manage?
Yeah. Let's go through a couple little, what I think have been very impactful for people and myself. We even did this the other night. My wife wanted to talk to me about something, and but she wasn't feeling very comfortable with me being right there. So I stepped out of the room around the corner where I could still hear her, and we were in separate rooms and had a conversation. And so if the intensity, the feelings are too high to have the conversation, how do we decrease those? Okay, well, we can sit back to back. We can text each other. We can, if it's bombarding my nervous system and I'm just going to shut down, how do we reduce the intensity there? Um, Another one for me is I have a how to have clearing conversations kind of checklist. And the first one for me is making an appointment. And what this means is I'm going to say, hey, I want to have a conversation with you. I'm going to acknowledge, hey, it's really hard for me. When would you be open to this conversation? And so
Mm.
this creates presence, intentionality. We both know it's going to happen. I can't avoid it anymore because I've put it on our calendar.
Yeah, and the other person's not like coming in the door dealing with something you have
Yep.
no idea about, and you are like, "What did you spend at Bass Pro Shop?" And like they're like, "Oh God."
Yeah.
They get some sort of buy-in and are coming into it prepared. They're not so blindsided.
Yes. Both people being prepared can make
Mm.
so much difference. And especially when they're like, hey, my partner's kind of struggling to bring this to me, instead of they sprung it on me, and with the whole, we need to talk, like that doesn't feel good for anyone. And so I can prepare myself to be loving, caring, and emotionally available to them. And the first part of the conversation, when we started off, it's just a reminder of how hard this is for me and how much I love my person. Okay. And that's like my blueprint to how to have these really tough conversations. Make the appointment, start with a reminder of how difficult this is for me and my emotional experience right now. If we can access that. I mean, that's a hard thing to do. And then my expression of love. Next, I speak my intention of the conversation. And usually for me, it's like, hey, I want to feel closer to you. I want to alleviate this problem. I want to, uh, you know, love you more, be together, that type of thing. And then when it comes down to communication, we start with accounting and taking accountability for our part of it. Like, here's where I've been struggling. Here's where I wish I could do better. And this if you have seen John and Julie Gottman or any of their
Mm.
information about communication, this step of owning my part of it reduces my partner's defenses. And now we can talk more openly. If I come in saying, hey, this is what you're doing, that's a problem for me, right away, boom, our walls up, we're shutting down, we're not having a conversation anymore. And so those are just some recommendations of how to start and come into these conversations uh, that will increase the likelihood of success.
And what is success? Like, what would you title success in something like this?
Yeah, that's a great question. Success for me personally is having the conversation. It doesn't have to conclude in a way that I want. It doesn't have to actually lead anywhere. It's opening just the first part of it, opening the conversation about it. Because honestly, many things that are hard and challenging, we're going to have to sit with. I know I'm a sitter. I like to sit with things and process and feel into it. Some people are a lot faster and they're ready to go and they're ready to respond right away. But I think success, if you've reached this point, you've already had success
Yeah.
for me.
This is just speaking so much to me right now. We're going through like a big transition in our house right now. And I am, I tend to rush things. I want to get past the discomfort, I want to push
Mm.
past it. And I married a glacier.
Hey, friends, we're taking a break from this episode so I can share with you a little more about one of our sponsors, Fullwell. Fullwell is a reproductive health company offering superior nutritional supplements that are made without compromise to support women and men throughout their reproductive journey. I have taken Fullwell's prenatals, their fish oil, and have literally tried every product they've released, and I stand behind this recommendation with my whole heart. One of my favorite things to recommend to clients is their fertility trio. This includes their egg and sperm quality supplement, their women's prenatal, and fish oil. This helps proactively support you getting ready to conceive. This trio includes things like CoQ10, ashwagandha, and NAC. It makes me think of a life vest. You don't want to go into pregnancy without these foundational supports. And if you've been struggling while trying to conceive, this is the time to upgrade your prenatal fertility game and check out Fullwell. Use code FFF20 today to get 20% off your first order.
A human glacier. And, it's so funny because it like attracts you to this person initially. I'm like, gosh, he is so calculated. And he is like just
stable. He doesn't
and
move.
stable. And he's so reliable, so trustworthy and loyal. And he never says anything he doesn't mean. He never pops off half-cocked, ever. And I tend towards that way more. I mean, there's so many things I wish that I could have not ever said in this world, and that seemed so great as they were happening. But boy, it's like then your greatest weakness is in the shadow of your greatest strength, right? Where I'm like, come on, like process it. Let's move forward. I just don't want to stay here anymore. Let's just get past it. But
So,
he's a glacier. And
Sophia,
glaciers
what
are
would
beautiful and important.
they are. What would your success look like then from your
Really my success with anything is very simple. Closer together than we were before.
Yeah.
That's really my definition of success in anything, even if it's like you said, like it doesn't work out the way that I want. Maybe I wanted him to like, take out the trash more frequently or something. I don't know, like something simple like that. Even if that ends up not happening, like taking out the trash becomes my responsibility or something. I don't know. The end result of the task at hand doesn't matter to me as much as that we are closer together and have a more intimate connection than we did at the beginning of the conflict, the conversation, whatever it is that we're having. That would really be my definition of success.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, relationships are just a series of connection and disconnection. And the more time we have connection and the longer we have connection, then we're doing great. Whenever we are in conflict, it's a moment of disconnection. The question is not how can we solve the problem, but how can we reconnect? How can we come back to connection every single time? And maybe it's, there's different magnitudes of connection. Maybe it's big, maybe it's small. Maybe we're in such a tense spot we can connect over a little bit of humor. Maybe one of us is not ready for that. And so
that happens a lot here too, is I'll get silly about something and he's like,
so
I'm like, I just want to feel better,
I have a question about that, because I was just going to ask you, people might define connection really differently. And I think a lot of times one partner might feel like this will feel better once we physically connect. And another partner might be thinking, this will feel better once I feel heard and I understand your point of view, and we've kind of dialogue connected. I don't know the right way to say that. And yet there's a statement that I heard a long time ago by somebody who I really respect in the like marriage and sex landscape. And she calls it coffee pot intimacy, where it's like the next day. And there's like this sweetness that happens that's a fruit of good intimacy, and not good sex, but good intimacy, where you wake up the next morning and you're like, oh, we are closer. That when you're both standing at the coffee pot, you reach over and just graze your partner's hand because you just love them. And that feeling has kind of like connection breeds more connection. Like we say this about babies and sleep. Like if you want your baby to sleep well, they need to sleep. Sleep bears fruit in sleep. Connection bears fruit in connection. The more connected you feel. And so how would you like counsel a couple that feels they have different goals in connecting, but both want to get to the same place?
Yeah, first we talk about there's a number of things out there, love languages. So with that, we're trying to find a similar language so that we can speak to one another.
Mm-hmm.
If we're both going over here like, hey, this is good for me and this is good for me, well, what does good mean and all this? There's so much error in our words. So first we have to just find something that we can find a common language on. We could talk about love language. We could talk about the different types of intimacy is a big one. So for me, the way I look at it, we have physical intimacy, which is different than sexual intimacy. We have emotional intimacy, intellectual, spiritual, and experiential. So experiential is doing something new and different together. So we experience something together, right? And so we all have something that I think of it as a circle. And what's the starting point? So if all the types of intimacy are in this circle, where we want to start might be different from where somebody else wants to start. So my wife, for instance, wants to start at emotional connection. I want to start at physical connection. And so how do we navigate these things? And so first we have to understand what our patterns are and what are as a couple. And then we can talk about how to navigate those. So really basic, it's like, hey, let's get on the language of what this looks like, and then know where each other's at. Because if we don't even know where we're starting, how can we ever get anywhere? And so, um, finding some way to have the deeper conversation where it's like, hey, we can really understand what each other are saying at this point is like my first goal. And then we develop plans from there.
When you consider working with a couple, I mean, most of our audience are a male and a female trying to get pregnant together. And one of them feels like I'm failing my partner because I can't give them a baby. And that both sides can feel that way.
Yeah.
What would you say to somebody that feels like they're carrying that around and it's just like this heavy thing? And I mean, I heard this on our podcast with somebody very recently who is celebrating success and having a baby. But before they got pregnant, she had feelings of like, should I just like let him go because I'm not going to be able to give him a baby and he wants to have children? Like, I'm incapable of that. Well, we found out she wasn't, but that feeling is a really heavy one. And I think, we know statistically infertility is one of the hardest things to survive as a couple.
Yep. Infertility and the death of a child have the highest rates of divorce and that type of stuff. And so I have a best friend right now going through this. He's wanting a child. His partner of 7 years is not open to that. And so what do they do?
Yeah.
And so that's a little different than your question, but it's
Mhm.
kind of this idea of like, what if one person is bearing all the weight? What do you do with that? And
Mhm.
the first thing that comes to mind is, as human beings, we are social creatures. We need support. We need community. And so that's why I love what you're doing and having these conversations. Who can we lean on? Who can we talk to? Who can we relate to on that level? And what is that person? If they're all alone, the solution would be to not be all alone, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
where's the support? You know, who are they working with? What's happening there? And to love people and support them through feeling that is my biggest thing. Is I think we've lost so much of the community in today's society. And I think if we come back to that, that's really where some of that burden can be relieved of one person carrying all that. And so, um, yeah, that's the simplest kind of, hey, the support piece.
I mean, for Sophia and I both, we work with groups at times. We work one-on-one with people. And I think a lot of times people want just us one-on-one, but the ones that dive into a group setting find that there's like this magic piece that they get from that actually is maybe the most transformational, like not feeling alone, seeing someone else's success that is walking the same path as you.
Yeah, seeing someone have a breakthrough in an area where you're stuck, or you had a breakthrough in an area where they're stuck.
There's so much there. Well, I have two more questions I'd love to ask you before we kind of work on wrapping this up and doing our My Man segment.
My man.
You talk a lot about the masculine journey. If you were speaking to our female audience, what insights have you learned from all these men that you've worked with and their kind of transformative stories about men that might be surprising to us that could help us support our partner?
Oh, I love this. I can't wait to hear your answer.
While trying to grow a family.
Yeah, so I call a lot of my stuff that I put on the masculine journey, because as men, our journey through life is different. It's not easier, harder. It's just different. And, the surprising pieces are we're more alike than we are different. We're impacted by the same things. The difficulties we have show up in our everyday life. It's just sometimes harder for us to express those things. It's not as socially appropriate. It's, women deal with a lot of what society says for them, and men do in a different way. And I think what I want for myself and for everyone I work with is to be fully expressive, to be able to, as a man, put myself and my needs at the top of my list, and get out of the stories that I have been told and tell myself. The ability to spend time and money on myself for becoming a better version of me is something I run into with most every male person I work with, is how hard it is for them. If, for instance, I have a retreat coming up, well, if their kid wanted to go to a 3-day camp that costs the same amount, you know what they do? Anything to make it happen, right? You know what they'll do for themselves? Absolutely nothing. They'll find every reason.
They'll wear the same T-shirt till the armpits are falling out, and they won't buy another one. But their kid has like 4 kinds of My Little Ponies. Yeah,
that's right. And so I want to say to your audience, support your partner, encourage them to do things. It might take away time and resources from the family, but when they come back, it's tenfold.
Right. It's a richer experience for everyone.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, and if we're struggling to support them in that means we probably have some built up resentment that we need to work through. And so, that's often a sign of that. And so what I need from my partner is for her to be like, yes, I'm going to champion you, do things for yourself. And I think the other big thing for me is when we're working really well, she is my muse. She is the person who is tempting me to do great things. She is helping me, and it's just so fun that she has ideas that she brings to me, and then she's like, hey, I just want to do this, figure it out, and I get to do that for her. And so this is this nice balance.
I love that.
And it's a very beautiful balance.
I mean, it's interesting asking you about the masculine journey, or the masculine, because I don't know you well at all, Mark, but what I feel like I've learned over the last 57 minutes and 13 seconds is that you are very well spoken, you exude a great amount of like confidence, which I think women want in their partner. They want to feel safe. They want to feel,
Oh, absolutely.
they don't want to be with
Confidence is
somebody
so
that,
sexy. That's what I love about my guy, his quiet confidence. That's what I
yeah, you
always
don't want to
describe
have to
him.
be
Yeah.
like telling them every second,
Yeah. A
like,
lion doesn't tell you he's a lion. You just look at
yeah,
him and there he is.
totally. Mark's a lion. But yet there's like
Lions, not sheep.
this,
Keelan's favorite type of person.
there's this like gentleness to you. There's like this expressiveness, which you've brought up that you want men to be able to have. And that's very different from what society says is a hot stud and what these men have been told their whole lives. They were told not to cry. You're a boy. Don't do this. Don't feel that. Turn that off. Go be strong. Be reliable. There's like this like kind of beautiful both sides that I feel like you're displaying. And I can see how men working with you might have an advantage of accessing some of that for themselves because you're displaying it in a way that is like accessible, attractive, and not like a weenus guy. Like you can be gentle and kind and loving. Like how
Yeah.
often do you hear a man say like, I want, like I want to come to this conversation, say I don't feel comfortable, this is what I want to talk about, but I need to express that I love you and I'm coming to this from a place that I love you and we need to get past this. Like
Mm-hmm.
I say those things, but I don't feel like I've heard a lot of men say those things. I just am really impressed.
Sophia here, interrupting this episode to talk about fond bone broth, tallow, and lard. So, fond bone broth has long since been a staple in my home kitchen. I use this all the time. You will always find it in my kitchen. And you know what? I even make my own bone broth. That's how much I love fond is I pay money for something that I also regularly make for myself. It is beyond delicious. The flavors that they have in these broth, it's so deep and complex. It's not like a can of Swanson's. It's not just like the chicken and stars type flavor, though that can be delicious at times. This is such a complexity of flavor. It's almost like a beverage, and I'm not exaggerating. Plus, you can use it in cooking, everything from vegetables, starches, grains. Very, very easy way to get more collagen, protein, and minerals into your life by simply cooking with broth. It is truly delicious and it will take any dish you use to cook with it from just a normal dish on the table to truly gourmet. So head on over to fondbonebroth.com and use code FFF10 for 10% off your first time order. Bye. Yeah.
I'm just
thank
dabbling,
you.
but
You're impressed. And you kind of have a look about you like a early 2000s Ben Affleck.
I have been told that before. Don't put that on me though. His relationship.
Yeah, no, not Ben Affleck
yeah,
today. I'm talking about Ben
yeah.
Affleck, like Gone Girl Ben Affleck.
There you go.
well, even still, he's never had the relationship.
The look, not the relationships.
Yeah.
Okay, so the second question I have for you, Mark, is to the ladies, right? So I feel like
Yeah.
you've kind of actually said something to the ladies, like
Mhm.
support the guy. But is there something that you found from your time working with couples that's been kind of like a revelation of what women may need or maybe stronger in an area that they might be surprised to hear and that they can kind of lean on or grow in a capacity?
And the couples. What I think this is going to be back to the guys though. Some insight. There's a controversial book called No More Mr. Nice Guy. And there's a bunch of reasons it's controversial, but um, the idea behind it is that, a lot of the men, um, they want to be great men. They want to be great partners. Um, we've just got this idea that if we're nice, we'll be loved. And that's completely off. That's not how we get love. You don't have to be nice to your kids to be loved. You have to be loving to your kids to receive love, right? You get what you bring back in. And so with that is, hey, we sometimes fall victim to being overly nice and not telling you what we feel or what we want, and and that often is where a lot of conflict comes from. um, and so I think there's this
You're
concept
sort of
of,
martyring yourself and building a
yeah,
little bit more resentment and a little
yep,
bit more like, don't you see what I'm sacrificing for you?
hmm,
And so when that finally comes to a head and you're like, I'm doing this thing. And
yep,
she's like, who told you not to? Like, but you're just coming at this. You get all defensive about yourself. Yeah, I see that. I know just, yeah, what you're talking about there.
yeah. And that's a great example, right? A lot of resentment builds when we do stuff for others and don't have enough space for ourselves.
Hmm.
And so and I this could go on both sides of the conversation. I think sometimes we over sacrifice, men and women both. We over sacrifice in areas that our partners have not asked us to, and then
Hmm.
we fall victim to like, well, I did all
Yeah,
this.
why am I
Why
not
didn't
getting
you
the
notice?
accolades?
Yeah,
Oh, dude, you
yeah.
are speaking to my life right now.
Sophia, I feel
Yeah,
like you've found your person.
dude, I know. Actually,
How do we hire you?
how do we hire you? Yeah.
You know what's funny too, Mark?
How much PTSD veteran work do you do? How many combat survival Purple Heart warriors do you have?
Mm, hundreds.
Hundreds. Ooh.
So Sophia and I have this like very interesting marriage of sorts where we really have different strengths and different weaknesses and have an unrelenting love for each other and like want to bring out the best in each other. And I feel like even recently we had a conversation where we both had to say hard things.
We
But
did.
afterwards, I felt so much better. I felt better in like every aspect of my life because this is like my best friend who fights for me and was willing to bring up hard things that were
Yeah.
impacting her. And I think that sometimes like the idea of the conversation can feel so big, but if you
Mhm.
remember you really love that person and you're trying to come together, right? We're trying for that
Yeah,
connection.
we're not coming in this just to dump on you and tell you that you're annoying. This is
Right.
like we're trying to come together. I want to heal this to continue. I'm committed to being with you and I
Mhm.
want it to be good. I see that we can have something great here. Let's aim for that instead
Yeah.
of just like sort of wallowing in mediocre because we're unwilling to like push past a difficult hurdle.
Yeah, and then, like, one step past that, what I say to her is to her face, and I don't go bitch about her to other people because I protect her, and, like, I think that that's a piece of, like, for women, it can be really hard to not be like, "I can't believe this is happening," and very often, men just shut down and maybe I'm overgeneralizing, but, like, don't talk about their problems with their friends, and then both people don't have the help they need. They have friends that are just mirrors, like, "Yeah, that's so fucked up and so hard,"
Yeah,
and
miserable
then
comforters or just an echo chamber. Yeah.
and then we have men who are like, "I have nobody to have a safe conversation with about how hard this is,"
I
and
know
that
that
might
blows
be
my
really
mind. You'll spend the
helpful.
whole day with somebody and you're like, did his wife have the baby yet? And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, you don't even know if this guy has a new kid?
Life-changing event,
What?
and you didn't ask.
I don't know, it's just
What
so interesting, but I
you'd be kind of surprised to know that so I'm on some guys group, dads groups and stuff on Facebook and other places, and you'll see about 50-50 the same thing for men. Men will
interesting.
say, hey, I'm struggling with my partner and this is what's happening. Half the guys will get on there and be like, yeah, she's this or that, you should just divorce her, I know a good attorney. And then the other half are like, oh man, that's tough, and they like are actually there.
Uh-huh.
And so um it's a very interesting mix when guys do express
Right.
what they'll get.
Yeah,
They
Hmm.
interesting.
You have the guys that have been hurt and haven't
Dealt
essentially
with
haven't
it.
healed,
Mhm.
and then you have people that are there with them. And so one of our modules in our couples course is all about having supportive relationships and the challenging thing of getting rid of people that don't support you in your relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
because I want everyone around me, when I say, I call my best friend and say, hey, this is what happened, and I'm really upset with my wife, and, this or that, I want him to say yes. And what did you do? What could you do better? And, this relationship's great. And what are you going to do to fix it?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I want in my friendships. And I think if we look for people that can do that for us, we're going to be so much better off. I think the other challenge is, what if our family members are those people that aren't supportive, or they have past injuries, and so their response is to dump on our partner or somebody, that type of thing.
Or they're
What
just
do
in
we
a
do with
toxic, codependent, enabling relationship themselves.
Yeah.
Not
And
that
so
I've
what do we
never
do with
ever known
family?
anyone like that.
Sounds like experience.
All right. Well, I think you just wrapped it up and put a nice bow on it, Mark, my man. We're going to switch to our Yeah Girl segment, where we're going to celebrate something personal, professional, otherwise, whatever you want to celebrate. I'll kick it off so you can get a flavor for what this could sound
Well,
or
before
feel.
And
you
when she says the good thing, we go, yeah, girl.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before you do that, I want to reflect back to you. I see that in your friendship, everything you were saying, and it's so beautiful to witness.
Oh,
And
thanks.
Thank
so,
you.
yeah, it's been a pleasure watching you two.
Oh, thanks.
And,
We have a lot of fun together, and we're different in a lot of the best ways. Caitlin, she's so grounding for me, and there have been so many things that I could have really gotten so heartbroken over that she has reframed in a new way for me. That's like, oh, maybe this doesn't have to be as injuring as like I thought it was going to be, or I don't know. Caitlin just
Find your
lives her
person.
life in a level of freedom that I tend to really bind myself in too many ways, and she just doesn't really do that to herself. It's very helpful for me.
yeah, that's beautiful.
I think, honestly, like, we have helped thousands and thousands of people just with this podcast. And
Mhm.
and a part of it is because we have a relationship that, like, we have both said to each other, our relationship is more important than this podcast. So the
Oh,
moment this
100%.
detracts from this in any way, we need to cut it. This is like,
Yeah, either change the thing that's hurting it or just
Right.
throw this out the window because it's not
Yeah.
worth it
Yeah.
at all. Well, thank you, Mark. Those are kind
Yeah.
words. It's really
Makes me
great to hear
happy.
that. I feel that in my heart towards her, so it's nice to see that that's what's showing from the outside too. So let's hear Yeah Girl, Miss Caitlin. Let's hear it.
BJ has been
That's her
in
husband.
Europe for 2 weeks, 2.5. He comes home tomorrow.
Ooh,
So talk about intimacy evolution and
missing each
missing
other.
someone. I'm like, get that honey boy back here. And also, in the same light, and I know not everybody has this, and so I say this with compassion, I have truly the best mother-in-law alive. She's just the best.
Colleen, shout out to you.
She's the best. I texted her today and was like, and I cannot parent today. I'm done. I've reached a limit. There will not be kind words coming from my mouth. I will be at your house at 1 p.m. If you put them in front of the TV, that will be fine, but I need to not be there. And she texted me back, let's do a sleepover. And so I dropped my children off at 1. Tonight I'm going to sleep through the night. I'll have time to clean up a little bit because I like to have a nice home for my husband to walk into. And like, it's like I'm so taken care of knowing my husband's on a flight in 12 hours to come home to me.
Wow.
And I'm going to rest for 12 hours before
Yeah, girl. Wow.
Yeah,
What a
that's
gift.
amazing.
Colleen, yeah, girl to Colleen, yeah, girl to
Yes.
Caitlin for saying what you need and getting the help.
Yeah.
And not just trying to soldier on and being a beast and yelling at everybody all day.
I don't want to be that mom. And sometimes you just have to like figure it out and you don't have
Yeah, you don't have a resource, and so you just have to.
But today I was like, well, you gave me the card to call and pull at any point, and so I'm pulling the card. I raised the red flag.
Waving the white flag. I surrender. Well, yeah, girl, good for you. Okay, Mark, do you have one, or do you want me to do one?
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm working on mine.
You guys, oh my God, you guys. 2 girls from my group coaching are pregnant.
Woo-hoo!
And they have each has had a series of losses before this baby that they're pregnant with right now. But we are seeing HCG levels rising, doubling, tripling, quadrupling. We are seeing strong pregnancy signs coming left, right, and strong progesterone. Yeah, this one gal had it drawn. She like barely had a positive, and so she ran in. She just happened to be like seeing a doctor that day. Just happened to be, she had an appointment scheduled, so she got a draw, and her HCG was nearly 400, and her progesterone was 35.
Amazing.
I was like, excuse me, that is so good.
Woo!
Yeah, girl.
Yeah,
to
girl.
both of them. So, and I am just, I've just come to love both of them so much, and have just been praying for them all the time, that God would just bring them that strong, healthy baby. And here it comes. I think that both of these babies are just kicking strong. And so I'm really, really, really pumped that 2 graduates of the Proluteal Lab.
Hey, it's me again, Sophia, registered dietitian nutritionist specializing in women's health, fertility, and optimal progesterone production. And I'm interrupting an episode of my own podcast to tell you about my online course called Ovulation Unlocked. So if you've been listening to our podcast episodes, you've probably heard a lot of things about basal body temperature, cervical mucus, cervical position, and tracking your fertility. Well, I have designed a 90-minute self-paced online course, which I titled Ovulation Unlocked, that puts all of that together and teaches you how to be the expert on your own fertility from home. This course is designed to put you in the driver's seat of your own fertility, not only so you can know what's going on with your body on any given day, but so that if you need medical help, you can show up to the appointment informed and ready to communicate. Too frequently, us women show up to our doctor's appointments and just say something like, I want to have a baby. And the doctor looks at you and says, good for you. Stop using birth control, start taking a prenatal, come back in a year if you're not pregnant. And that's all we get. However, Ovulation Unlocked puts you in the driver's seat, puts you in control of your fertility, to where if you need help, you can show up to that appointment informed and ready to communicate your needs. So if you want to become the expert on your own body and your own fertility, head on over to my Instagram bio and tap the Ovulation Unlocked link today.
One was from my winter program, and the other from my spring program. But they both got babies in their bellies.
That's the best.
So it's really awesome. The best. I'm like,
yeah, girls
over here from this. Yeah, girls. All right, Mark, let's hear yours.
The thing that's coming up the most is actually about my son turning 9. Really? I walked in the other day to my wife reading I'll Love You Forever. And she was crying, I was crying. It was this beautiful moment, and the realization of the beauty of watching your kids grow and the pain of watching them grow.
I know.
And so it was just a very beautiful experience for the family, for the kids to witness both of us,
have
being in an emotional experience. Yeah.
Oh man.
And so I can feel it come up right now. I can feel the pressure behind my eyes. And
that's so sweet.
I feel mine right here. This is the first place I feel like I need to cry.
So I love that book, and I've loved it since I was a small child. And then I married my husband, and I bought the book for our children. This sounds like such an asshole thing to say after such a beautiful reflection. He read the book and comes to me after bedtime. He's put the kids down. He's like, that is the creepiest book I've ever read. She is like climbing into her grown son's window, rocking this like 30-year-old. and he's asleep in her arms. And I was like, excuse me, you have just ruined like one of my most beloved books.
Oh,
Yeah, if you
BJ,
take it
God
at
bless you. And it's funny
two,
because he's not an unemotional
No,
guy.
he's very
Like
much that way.
he is emotional, and he is, I mean, he's not like, some blubbering loser, but like he's not like choking back emotion and like Mr. Tough Guy persona or anything like that. And so the fact that he's not like, that book was so touching me, is
I
like,
cried.
weirdo.
hey, if you take it too literally, it can get weird. Yeah, I could see that.
Mark, we have to have you back. And next time I'm driving through Bentonville, I'm going to get your number so I can text you.
Please
Maybe we
do.
can have coffee. You've
Definitely.
been a pleasure to speak with. I can already think of a couple people I'm sending your information to. It's just
Yeah,
Awesome.
been
before
a
we sign
treasure.
off, can you just tell people where can they find you? Intimacy Evolution. What's
Yeah.
your
So
hashtag, your handle, your website? What kind of things you got coming down the pipe?
yeah,
Give us a quick 90 second.
intimacyevolution.com, Instagram, my wife, myself, and we have a company page. We have a podcast, and so you can go find that on all
What's it
places
called?
that have podcast. Intimacy Evolution.
Oh,
So yeah, and what I have coming down is I have a monthly men's group, virtual men's group that is people cycle in and out of it kind of as they please, but it's monthly, it's paid, it's a wonderful container to support men. I have a men's retreat coming up. I don't know if this will be released before or after that, but
talk about it anyway in
exactly.
case there's a new one. I can answer that.
Yeah. So twice a year, I put on my own men's retreats in Bentonville, Arkansas. This one is October 11th through 13th. It's a 3-day. You show up, you have an amazing curated experience. Food's taken care of, farm to table by a chef. The stays there. I have guest facilitators from all over the country coming. Yeah. So twice a year, I do that. It's a pretty big event for me. And yeah, other than that, we put on other local events. I help out around the country with men's retreats. So if you're ever looking for where one is or when, I could probably find one at some time in some area. That would be great.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for your time. This has been another episode of Food, Freedom, and Fertility. I hope that this conversation brought you a little bit closer to freedom. And I would highly encourage you, if you've listened to this alone, to maybe listen to it again with your partner. Bring that partner along for the ride.
Go get your man piece.
Yeah, I think you'll be glad you did. So if you like this episode, love it, want to hear more like it, first of all, go follow Mark and his wife and their business, and then head to your favorite podcasting app and give us a shout out, rate, review, like, and maybe consider sharing this episode with a friend.
Bye.